Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, ciao, bonjour, namaste, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hey, my name is Jedley. Welcome to Reading with Your Kids. We are coming to you from the beautiful, wonderful, historical neighborhood of Reedville, located in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so very honored and absolutely delighted that you're joining us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. We do that by sharing fun, thoughtful, and thought-provoking conversations with fascinating people who just happen to be writing books for kids of all ages. You can join us in this mission by telling all of your family and friends about the show and letting them know that they can hear us on the WREB AM/FM 24/7 radio network. And they can find us on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Good Pods, Amazon Music, Podcast Addict, Audible, CastBox, Player FM. Wherever you find your favorite shows, you can find Reading with Your Kids. We have a fantastic show lined up for you today. First up, Adam Rex is here. He's celebrating his brand new picture book. It's called Echo. And later in the show, Sarah Furlong is joining us to tell you all about Storyay. This is a great service that will create a personalized story all about your kids. Can't wait to listen to it. Hey, my friends, I'd love to take a moment to tell you a little bit about an organization that is near and dear to my heart. Clowns Without Borders. Clowns Without Borders. What an amazing group. Clowns Without Borders sends clowns all around the world to people who need to smile the most. Because of people like you who support Clowns Without Borders, nearly 3,500 kids and their caregivers in Lebanon recently shared a laugh with Clowns Without Borders. In one especially powerful moment, 400 school children gathered for a Clowns Without Borders show just 2 weeks after surviving a missile attack that happened right next to their school. They had only 15 minutes notice to evacuate, and all of them, thank goodness, made it out safely. You can make more of those laughters possible. Consider becoming a joy maker. Go to clownswithoutborders.org. Find out a little bit more about the organization and consider making a monthly gift to bring smiles to kids and adults who need it the most. Join us right now from the sunny and hot state of Arizona. Our guest is here today to celebrate his new picture book. It's called Echo. Please welcome the author and illustrator, Adam Rex. Hey, Adam, how are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for having me on.
Delighted to have you on. I'm hoping that somehow our conversation tonight can bring some of that heat here to Boston, because while it's a lot nicer than it was a couple of weeks ago, I could still stand for the thermostat to be raised.
I am envious. It is weirdly, inappropriately hot right now in Tucson. We don't usually get this close to 100 degrees in March, so it's kind of upsetting. Usually there's this kind of like 100-degree watch where we are all hoping that it won't happen until the second half of May, but I don't know. Apparently they already got up there in Phoenix, which is always a little hotter than it is here in Tucson.
Oh, my goodness. My goodness. Well, let's talk about something cool. Echo. Tell us about the book, please.
So this is my new picture book. I'm the author and the illustrator, and it's about a little boy named Junior who lives in a house on the side of a mountain. And he looks across the valley at another mountain, and he's a willful, difficult little boy who's used to getting his way. So when he, in frustration one day, shouts across the valley, Junior is the greatest in the world, he hears what seems to be another little boy on the other side of the valley shout back, Junior is the greatest in the world. So this kid seems all right to him. This kid always says whatever he says, which he thinks is the mark of a good friend. Oh. So he can chant, Junior is the smartest, Junior is the best, and this other boy on the other side of the valley will always shout the same thing, which is great. But it's a little lonely when your only friend is so far away. So Junior is happy when he sees that another kid is moving in next door. A little girl is moving into the house next door to him. So he sets out to have the same kind of relationship with her that he has with this mysterious boy across the valley. But it doesn't work out that way. He finds out that she actually has her own wants, needs, and opinions, and she doesn't just parrot back to him everything that he says, which makes him furious. So after a particularly humiliating episode with this girl, he decides to run away from home, to travel down into the valley and meet this other little boy, and finally meet him face to face. And on the way, he figures some stuff out about what a real friend is like, and what a enriching relationship with another person is like. And spoiler alert, it's not just having somebody say exactly what you say back to you all the time.
Yes, that would be that would not be fun. I think it would be fun at first, but then get old very quickly.
Yeah, I certainly am as guilty as anyone of surrounding myself with people that tend to have the same points of view that I do. But one thing I really love about my wife is that she's smarter than me, and she kind of sees through things a lot faster and better than I do. So, when I'm caught up in some sort of news of the day, or, I'm telling her about something I heard on a podcast or on the radio, she's always there with, really interesting and incisive questions and thoughts about it that make me realize I haven't been thinking about it as deeply as I thought I was. So even though she and I tend to agree on most things, I still really value a real relationship with someone who doesn't just nod their head at me all the time.
You and I are blessed in that way. We both have wives that are smarter than us and wiser.
Yeah, and I mean, mine is like empirically, demonstrably smarter than I am. She has a PhD in physics and is just a lot more put together than I am. Lucky for me, she doesn't have any interest in writing or illustrating children's books, or I'm not really sure how well I would handle that much of a challenge from my life partner. But anyway, yeah, she is the best thing in my life, she and my son.
That's awesome. Tell me, what inspired this book?
Well, I think it's probably obvious to any listener that it might have gotten started in my head from all the talk that we've been hearing lately about how we've all made these sort of bubbles and echo chambers for ourselves. And I think that's interesting. And again, I'm not saying I'm any different than anybody else about that. I have my own echo chamber, and I think, that there's problems with that, and there's a value to it as well. But, it got me thinking about how when I was a kid, I had a real problem with being wrong. I had trouble admitting that I was wrong about something. I had trouble admitting that I didn't know things. So, I've been saying lately that when I was a kid, I felt like I always had to be right. And I so therefore wrote a book about how wrong that was.
I love that. We are living in a time where so many of us are just choosing to spend time with people who agree with us, and just listening to media that agrees with us. And I think that's can be pretty dangerous sometimes, or at least it hurts us when it comes to getting along with others.
It can be, but, and also at the same time, I feel like sometimes people are a little too pat when they talk about that, like for a lot of people out there, we have this, frequent talk about how there's this virtue in actively finding people that disagree with our core beliefs and challenge us. And, for a lot of people out there, the opposition's core belief is that they should not exist in the first place. And I don't hold anybody to the, responsibility of having to, entertain the point of view of somebody who doesn't respect their basic existence as a person. Mm-hmm. So I'm not trying to take any kind of message that far. And, this is a picture book. So, luckily I'm talking to an audience that doesn't really have to, that shouldn't be having to think about that sort of thing. I just want to talk to kids and help them not be the sort of kid that I was, that thought that admitting that you were wrong was a failure and a weakness. And I reached a point as I got older, and I'm embarrassed to say this was probably well into my college years or maybe even a little after, where I realized how empowering it was just to say, oh, I don't know that. Tell me about that. Mm-hmm. Oh, I don't know what you're talking about. And I started to feel very liberated and uplifted by just admitting that I was wrong about things or didn't know what I was talking about. And I guess listening more than I was talking, which was certainly an inverse of whatever I had been doing for the rest of my life before that.
Yeah, yeah. It certainly is difficult sometimes for some of us to admit that we're wrong. One of the things that we've been celebrating a lot here on the podcast is just helping kids understand that a mistake, a failure, not knowing something isn't something to be ashamed of. It actually could be the first step in figuring out whatever it is that you're trying to figure out.
It's the first step in learning and becoming a stronger, better person. But I think also the thing that is frustrating to me is how much I bought into this idea and how often I see other people buying into this idea that, an admission of ignorance or wrongness is weakness instead of strength. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's the strength of character to be able to say, I got this wrong or I screwed up. It's the weakling that can't admit that and, ties themselves in ridiculous knots to keep asserting their rightness, even when they know that they're wrong and they know that the other person knows that they're wrong. I mean, how silly. And yet that was exactly what I was doing, when I was 10 years old, when I was 6 years old. So, yeah, I mean, that's basically where it came from. Also, I just was enchanted by the idea of maybe writing the story about a kid who thinks that echo is another person. And, I guess this is another spoiler, but it is. One of the twists of the book is that when he gets down to the bottom of the valley and ends up on this little bridge over a river between the two mountains, he actually meets another little boy who looks exactly like he does, except he's just wearing different colored clothes. And he finds out just how what a sort of a weak relationship it is that he has with this other little boy who is only ever saying, I don't know, what do you want to do? And saying yes to this and yes to that, even to all of Junior's worst ideas.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. You mentioned earlier your wife and your son are your most important blessings. How did becoming a dad change your art and your writing?
I was already making kids' books for a lot of years before I had an actual kid. So I think it's changed things in some kind of acute ways and also just some general ways. There's a recent book that I wrote, a picture book that was illustrated by Audrey Helen Weber called Tumble Baby that came out last year. And that one I wrote that as a direct sort of response to the inspiration of my newly adopted son and watching how he slept and how he rolled around and would roll right out of bed if you let him. And, so I ended up writing a story about a little sleeping baby who rolls all over the country, getting into adventures and doing good and making things right without ever actually waking up. So, I've actually had stories come out of the experience of being a father directly. But also I think I've had my eyes opened about kind of the breadth of kids that there are out there. I think I was a little insular in my thinking previously, where I kind of assumed that most kids were like me. I was being solipsistic about things, and I assumed that that all kids love to draw as much as I loved to draw when I was a kid, that they do the same things that I drew, that they had the same experiences with fiction. My kid is not particularly interested in like fantasy and science fiction, superhero stuff. My bread and butter growing up, and frankly, even still, I'm still in this state of arrested development where I'm reading superhero comics and as kind of a comfort food. He's not interested in any of that. He wants to read real stories about real experiences, actual injustice, real history, things that you would have sort of had to drag me by the hair through reading in school if you had to, if you happened to assign that reading to me. So, yeah, I think one of the things that's really come out of being a father is just realizing that there's an infinite number of different kinds of kids out there. So it's a good thing that there's so many different kinds of books, and it also means that I have to swallow the disappointment sometimes of realizing that the stuff that I write is not necessarily the kind of things that he wants to read. But I suppose all parents maybe have to deal with the indifference of their children towards the things that they do for a living and some of the things that they love. So I'm not any different than anybody else in that regard, I guess.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I want to mention, you mentioned that your son was adopted. I want to tip my hat to you and thank you for doing that. We've talked.
Thank you for saying so. But to be honest, I don't even particularly like to be thanked for that. It wasn't charity. It was my wife and I wanted a child, and we found a child that wanted parents, and neither one of us was saving the other any more than the other was saving us. Right. If that makes sense.
It does, and that is something that I hear a lot from adoptive parents. But I like to mention it just as a way to remind folks that there's close to 400,000 kids in our foster care system here in the United States alone, and they're looking for forever homes. And anytime I have an excuse to remind people of that, maybe inspire somebody to do what you did, then I like to take it.
Yeah, well, I do like that. My son, in the 22 months before we met him, was with a foster family, and that foster family is the kind of the angels of our lives. These people that took on this, and I don't know if I'm going to call it a burden, but played this enormous role in our lives. And they don't live in the same country as we do, and they don't speak the same language that we do. So we don't have the kind of relationship with them that we wish that we did. But, I can't thank those people enough.
Yeah. I'm interested. You mentioned that that book that was inspired by your son was illustrated by another artist. Was that difficult for you to let somebody take your manuscript and tell part of the story?
No, it's something I've done a number of times and have been doing for a lot of years now. When I began my career in kids' books, I had already been a working illustrator for a number of years. And so my first couple of books were merely as illustrator of other people's manuscripts. And I still do that from time to time. I just recently finished a picture book by another author that will be coming out next year, and so I still value being able to illustrate other people's manuscripts when I am presented with one and fall in love with it. And sometimes I feel like I write something that I need to be the illustrator of. But a lot of years ago, I started toying around in my head with this idea that maybe I didn't always have to be my own illustrator. Maybe, in fact, it was even arrogance possibly to think that everything that I wrote needed me to illustrate it, that I was somehow always the best person to illustrate my own writing. And I ended up writing a book called School's First Day of School, a book about a brand new school that just got built that is nervous about its first day of children. And I realized, having written that and thinking about it, that I wasn't sure how to illustrate it. The main character was a building. I wasn't sure how to do that. I wasn't sure how much to anthropomorphize that building, how to make it a character. I didn't really want to do like some overly personified thing where, you know, there are eyes in the windows and the door is a mouth or something like that. I didn't want it to be, you know, Pixar's buildings. Mm-hmm. But, you know, so I didn't quite know how to do it. And I didn't really think that anybody quite thought of me as a great architectural illustrator to begin with. So I thought, well, maybe this ought to be the first one where I see if anybody else wants to do this. I also kept thinking, as I did consider possibly illustrating it, that if I did so, I wanted to do a very different kind of style, something a bit more pared down, a little flatter and more iconographic. Something I kept on thinking about Christian Robinson's illustrations. Mm-hmm. And I love his work. I think he's one of the best illustrators working today. And so finally, you know, my agent and I just decided, like, why don't we see if maybe Christian would be interested in doing that? And, you know, working with the editor, Neil Porter, you know, we managed to talk Christian into actually illustrating it. So I ended up getting kind of my favorite picture book out of it. You know, I got to do a picture book with Christian Robinson. It kind of turned out exactly the way I wanted. And I don't think it would have turned out so hot if I'd done it myself. So in the years after that, I just keep asking myself, you know, does this need to be me? Could this better be illustrated by another person? And, you know, does it make sense to step away? And there's, you know, kind of a mercenary aspect to this too, where if I don't illustrate everything, I have more opportunities to illustrate other people's manuscripts that come in, to write something new. Illustrating a book takes me months and months. So, you know, sometimes I'm all too happy to say, I don't think I'm the right person to illustrate this. So, you know, you go work on this for half a year. I'm going to start writing the next thing.
Mm. I find you very, very interesting. You've shared that, you know, you were this kid that wasn't able to admit that he was wrong. And you shared just now that it was very difficult for you to imagine somebody else helping you tell the story. This self-realization, did it just happen, or did you put a lot of work into it?
I suppose it kind of happened naturally because I'm such a fan of other illustrators, and I was in the position where I was occasionally getting to work with an author that I really liked, mm-hmm. but I was never going to be able to work with illustrators I loved unless I made that happen. So, yeah, it wasn't all that difficult. And I get this question a lot, which leads me to believe that a lot of people, you know, find this kind of astonishing that, you know, if a person is capable of doing it all themselves, why would they ever want to relinquish any of the control? I talk to a lot of people who can't even understand the idea of working in a open way with an editor or an art director, because what if they have their own opinions and you disagree? And I long ago made my peace with the idea that even though sometimes my editors and I might disagree about things, my editors make my books better in the aggregate. So I like working with a team that makes suggestions and pushes me farther than I might push myself. Yeah. And so I was already working, you know, in an industry where it's not just me writing manifestos in a cabin in the woods. I was already working with a team. Mm-hmm. And so it just wasn't as big of a decision as I think a lot of other people assume it to be, that maybe I would also be open to working with illustrators, you know, of my writing as well as illustrating other people's writing.
Yeah. Well, I think it comes as a surprise to a lot of people. They think of authors and author illustrators as, you know, creating books is a very solitary thing, that, you know, it's just a writer who is struggling over the words for months or years, and they don't realize that it is a team. I suppose as a writer, as an illustrator, you do yourself a favor if you come to that realization that you're going into this to be part of a team as opposed to being a solo artist.
Certainly, if you want any kind of a publishing career in traditional publishing, then yeah, you need to put aside your ego and listen to other people's opinions. And, just being an art school graduate had gotten me used to that anyway. In art school, you have the harrowing experience sometimes of having to put your finished assignment up in front of the entire class and have them tell you what they think of it. And you learn pretty quickly that, what's really embarrassing is being the guy in class who tries to argue with everybody's points and point out that, oh, well, it's supposed to be like that. Your criticism that's actually my style. The deficiency that you found is intentional. Those people are embarrassing people, and you learn pretty quickly, or should, that you just shut up, you listen, you figure out later whether or not people are right. You don't try to judge in the moment. And one of the rules that I guess I sort of developed in art school as well is that no matter how wrong and outlandish I think somebody's opinion is, if I hear the same one twice, I have to give it some kind of serious thought. Yeah. And so I suppose in that sense, I, maybe already had my skin toughened up a little bit more than a lot of people who try to jump into the kids book industry and haven't had critique reviews, just as a matter of their education.
Yeah. I'm curious if you have any advice. Mentioning how your son isn't into the things that you're into and it's not necessarily a big fan of your books. I imagine that there are parents out there who have kids who are really into art and creating, but meanwhile the parent has no idea about that life. They don't feel creative at all. They don't think that they can draw. What advice would you give to parents to ways that they can encourage their kids' creativity?
I guess I wish for any kid like that to have the parents that I had, who were, just as you say, completely bewildered by this kid they had who wanted to be an artist when he grew up. And when I was a kid, I didn't know what that meant. Uh-huh. I certainly wasn't, back in 1980 saying I wanted to be an illustrator, much less an illustrator of children's books when I grew up. I didn't know what an illustrator was. I didn't know what kind of career I was going to have as a visual artist, but I started saying at a very young age, something like 5, that I was going to be an artist when I grew up. And my father was an engineer. My mother had been an English major, but nonetheless, neither one of them knew a single visual artist in their lives, at any point in their lives, really. So there's, it's kind of a funny thing that happens, I think, that when you don't have that object lesson, certain careers just sound like you might as well be saying that you want to be a fairy princess, or that you want to be 12 feet tall when you grow up. Saying perhaps that you want to be an artist is, almost equally as absurd sounding. But nonetheless, my parents and I found this out much after the fact, they just kept their mouths shut. They never discouraged me. They, when I showed interest in taking, after school classes and things, they signed me up for those. We were fortunate enough to be in the position where they could do that and make sure that I always had art supplies around the house. And they just kind of stayed out of my way. And I think crossed their fingers that I would change my mind eventually. There was a brief period in high school when I realized now they were sort of gently nudging me toward architecture. Uh-huh. They figured, well, that's drawing, kind of, right? That's a real job that actual people have. So, they nudged me towards that, but it didn't take. And everything has turned out fine. They couldn't be happier with what I do for a living now. But I made it kind of easy on them. I got good grades growing up, so I think they assumed that eventually I would realize that making art was just a hobby, and that, I would go into science or or be a professor or something. But yeah, I guess what I'm circling is just saying that I hope that those parents will just kind of shut up and let their kids draw and make opportunities available to their kids if those opportunities are within their means, and not worry about it too much, because frankly, if you got a kid who's saying when he's 5 years old that they want to be an artist when they grow up, chances are they are going to change their mind, because the kid next door says that they want to be a professional basketball player, and the one next to that says that they want to be a dolphin doctor, and they don't know what they're talking about either. But there's a possibility that they will follow this through, that they love art that much. And the last thing you want to be is the person that tried to get between them and the thing that they love.
Amen. Amen. Yes, absolutely. Adam, we should tell everybody where they can go to find out more about Echo and find out more about all the wonderful things coming from your imagination.
Well, thank you very much. Echo is published by Dial Books. And so it's available wherever fine books are sold, available for order, through all the usual channels. If you want to find out more about me, you can find me on my website, adamrex.com. There's a newsletter that I put out intermittently that you can sign up for there, or, find me on Blue Sky or Facebook as well.
Awesome. We've had a great time speaking to the author and illustrator of Echo. It's the brand new picture book from our guest, Adam Rex. Hey, Adam, thanks for spending this time with us.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
My friends, if you have ever thought about owning a business that's fun, rewarding, and makes a valuable contribution to kids' education, well, Brooklyn Robot Foundry is calling your name. I recently met Jenny Young. She's the founder of Brooklyn Robot Foundry. And let me tell you, she is incredible. Her passion for getting kids excited about STEAM, that's STEM plus art, it's contagious. I'm telling you. This isn't your average kids program. Brooklyn Robot Foundry is all about hands-on, screen-free STEAM fun. These kids get to build a different robot each class and take it home with them afterwards. Kids love it. Parents are raving about it. And now you can own a franchise and bring this incredible experience to families in your community. Now, this isn't your typical franchise. Brooklyn Robot Foundry is a mobile, flexible business with a deep curriculum that's making a real impact in schools and communities around the country. Franchise owners get a proven curriculum, full training, and support from a passionate team. So what are you waiting for? Please visit bit.ly/RobotJed. That's bit.ly/RobotJed. And let them know you heard about it on Reading with Your Kids. Join us right now from right outside of Toronto and Ontario, Canada, one of my favorite cities in the world. Our guest is here to celebrate a really new service. It's called Storyay. Am I saying that? Is it Storyay or is it Storyay?
It's Storyay. You're saying it right.
Please welcome to the show the driving force behind Storyay, Sarah Furlong. Hey, Sarah, how are you?
I'm very well. Thanks so much for having me.
You're very well. I guess if it was Story A, it would be EH at the end, right?
And that would be very Canadian.
So tell me, you were talking telling me a little bit before we hit record about Storyay. This sounds like a really neat service. Some people are familiar with personalized stories. I'm in book form, but this sounds much more sophisticated and there's a lot more detail.
Absolutely. So at Storyay, we kind of looked at how do kids want to interact with literature and the world around them. And we found that a lot of kids weren't wanting to pick up a traditional book in the same way. Short form content is really in, and some kids that are struggling with reading or a little bit advanced for their age might find that a traditional book just doesn't suit them. So that's where we came up with the idea of Storyay, which is essentially taking a book, breaking it into chapters, and then sending those chapters one at a time to a kid but everything is personalized and fully interactive. So it's like the main character went on an adventure and they're writing you stories while they're out doing it that are all personalized to you that you get to interact with along the way.
This sounds like a perfect way to get what a lot of people refer to as reluctant readers, to give them a chance to give them something that they're going to want to read.
Absolutely. Reluctant readers are my absolute favorite people. I've been writing for reluctant readers for a long time with that idea of kids that might not like reading or might struggle with reading still want something that's age and interest appropriate. A lot of times what ends up happening is they end up getting something that's written for a child much younger. And then they're kind of like, oh, now I'm really turned off of it. Whereas this gives an opportunity where they're not intimidated by a whole book, but they get the opportunity to read something that's actually written for them, because we know that kids are way more likely to read something that's personalized, especially if reading isn't their first choice.
Yeah. Now, I've seen personalized books in the past, and it's like, you know, Michael's adventure with Santa Claus, and it starts off, Michael went to visit Santa Claus, and then the rest of the story is the same that Sarah and Tommy, everybody else will get. Storyay is a little bit different, right?
It is absolutely different because we don't just personalize it to the name of the child, we also personalize their interests. So when you sign up for Storyay, the child gets to choose which story they want to be part of. So the first thing they receive is 3 intro letters, and these ones introduce them to the 3 different stories, and they get to pick. Because again, we know kids are more likely to read something that they chose versus something that mom went online, picked a story and sent it to them. They get to be part of the choosing. They also get to choose which narrator they hear from. So each story has a male and female narrator. So they get the opportunity if they want to hear from Maggie or Mario. Because again, some kids don't want to hear from the same or the opposite gender. We just give them that opportunity to choose that. Then from there, there's a survey. So mom, dad, grandma, whoever goes on with the child, and they answer a bunch of questions. But it's things like, what's your favorite food, your favorite color, your favorite subject in school? Those answers are then woven into the story. So each letter has personalization of their name as well as one point of interest. And it's highlighted. Like it could be something like, you know, we went to the farm and the chickens went loose. Hey, chickens are your favorite animal, right? We knew that you love them too. So it's something where the child really feels like this is actually for them, as opposed to just, you know, Dear Sarah, and then nothing else is personalized throughout. Their name appears multiple times through each letter. Everything really feels like a custom personalized experience.
Now, I'm guessing you're not sitting up with a cup of Tim Hortons writing all these stories yourself.
I am. So what we do, all these stories are written by me. We have different illustrators for each story, but I wrote all of them. But each one is, we have the technology behind it. That's part of it is our Storyay engine that we put in spots in each story that are going to be personalized. And they're all woven into the narrative. So nothing feels like it's just sort of sitting on top. It's part of the story and it's intricately woven in. You know, we double checked to make sure that everything makes sense with every possible permutation of answers, so that if a kid gets it, it really does feel like this pen pal is writing to them and they know them. It's not just a surface level interest.
This sounds amazing. And what a wonderful time we're living in, that we have the technology that lets us do something like this.
Absolutely. And we do it all without the use of AI, which is really important to us. So all of the illustrators are humans that we personally know, that we actually are back and forth with. The stories are written by me and the tech is created by a member of the team. So this isn't something where, because that's the first thing everyone always asks, oh, so you just plug it into an AI thing, it just shoots out a story. No, this was all done by people who specialize in children's literature to ensure that the stories are, you know, they're interactive, they're fun, and they are age appropriate to the kids that we're writing to. We're launching with stories for kids that are 7+, and then Storyay Junior will be coming out very soon for kids that are younger who will be reading with a parent as opposed to most likely on their own.
This is really exciting. I'm sure that you've run tests so far on kids, and what's the reaction been?
So far, it's been overwhelmingly positive. For one, the kids love the stories, and for two, they love the look of the stories because the illustrations really are spectacular. And because we have 3 different illustrators, there's a different feel to each and every one. So some kids will gravitate to one purely from the look of it, and then others will gravitate to another. So we really found that kids could find themselves within the 3 stories that we're launching with. And just that feeling of it being totally for them, like getting something in the mail when it's not a bill is exciting for adults. And it's really exciting for a child when this comes, they get to open it. It's written to them. It's all for them. It's their own personal thing. That part of the experience has been really special to see.
Well, as you're saying that, I'm flashing back when my son was in fourth grade. He had an assignment that at that time they were supposed to write to a politician or public servant in the area, and my son really went wild with it, and my daughter helped out too. He wrote to our district attorney, and he got a very nice letter back, and so it excited him. So he wrote to the president, and
wow,
he got a response back. I don't think the president actually sat down and wrote to my son. But it was very neat. And the thing, I'll always remember, the thing that impressed my son the most wasn't the fact that the president of the United States, we think, sat down to write him a letter. It was that he sent it first class mail.
Ooh.
I remember him going, "This is first class mail."
It's, you know what? There's something so special for kids about something that's actually for them. Right? Like so many things get passed down, hand me down, you get to borrow it, you get to whatever. Whereas like, that's what we wanted, that experience is exactly that feeling of like, no, this is mine. It's written to me. It's addressed to me. Everything inside of it is to me, because kids don't get that, especially now, right? Everything's digital. There's very little physical stuff that happens.
Right. Yeah. I don't think a lot of young people even know how to address an envelope.
No, exactly. Because it's just not something that really happens, right? And everything is just assumed. It just shows up in your inbox and you just open it and it's on your computer or your device. But to actually physically have something in your hands, that tactileness, there's something really special about that.
Now, you're mentioning the illustrations. I can't imagine that the illustrator is creating however many illustrations there are in each story just for my kid. Am I about that?
No. So right now the illustrations are the same in each story. They are the characters on the adventure versus your child in the illustrations. But that is something that we are hoping for upcoming seasons to be able to have an option where you can put your child right into it. Our younger age group that will be coming up next, the characters themselves will be named after the children, right? So they will become the main characters. The older demographic, it's more pen pal feel where it's written to them as opposed to them being in the story, because that felt more resonant with those slightly older kids who aren't going to be like, well, I mean, I know that this isn't about me. It's like, no, they're writing to you as opposed to you becoming the character.
Yeah. My mind is weird. If you've listened to the podcast, you know, I just got a flash of the screw tape letters into my brain. And I remember how much fun I had reading that book.
Yeah. It's a very different style that what kids are getting. And that I remember as a kid having a pen pal and it being such a cool thing to write them a letter and read the letter from them. And that's sort of the idea behind this, is that kind of feeling where it's like you open it and it's like where we left off. We were, you know, there was all this peril. This thing was happening. We'll be back to you as soon as we can. And it's like, you just can't wait to see what happened to them next, because they become a real character to you, right? Like they have that friendship, which a lot of kids are lacking, is that sort of not within their immediate space friendship that they can get from these characters.
Now, the letters come once a week?
Every 3 weeks. So it's about 6 months for the entire cycle of the story.
So every 3 weeks for 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
That's wow. Talk about
yeah. Exactly. So, and every letter is about 10 to 12 pages long. So they're quite substantial. And within them, there's, like I said, there's illustrations and there's always 3 activities. Some of those are coloring pages. There's mazes. There's other types of puzzles like solve the riddle, that kind of stuff, spot the difference, things that really bring the kid into the story. Mm-hmm. And the activities are never sort of a standalone. They're part of the plot. So it'd be something like, you know, we showed up at grandma's house and something looked really different. Can you spot all the things that were weird? And then the kid gets to be part of it. So we really wanted to weave those things in, because literacy through entertainment is really what we're going for, but truly they're stealthily educational, right? Kids are doing things that they're reading, they're comprehending, they're doing, you know, some things that actually require them to use their brain to solve a puzzle. There's fine motor. There's all kinds of things within it, but it's never presented as an educational piece. It's presented as pure fun, but those elements are woven in.
Well, I am a big proponent of learning, fun learning. I did educational magic shows for 35 years. And And oftentimes we'd get criticized by some old school and some young teachers, like, oh, learning should be fun. Kids should just sit down and learn because they're supposed to learn. But when you look at when you look at a hockey player, a young kid who's learning how to play hockey, the coaches make the drills fun and competitive. So the kids are wanting to do it, and they're learning every time they get on the ice and they're skating, they're warming up, they're playing a scrimmage. It's a learning process.
100%. And kids are way more likely to continue and to learn if they're enjoying themselves, right? As soon as they sniff out that this feels like work, it's really hard. Now they're turned off. Now this is no longer something I want to do. It's something I have to do. And our whole thing was we wanted kids to be immersed and enjoying it. And the benefit is that they're choosing to read. They're choosing to sit and interact with this 12-page letter. That's, for one, an actual thing. And for two, they're part of it. They're part of this adventure. And then at the end, they have this whole, 8-part novel, essentially, that they were part of. And for a lot of kids, that's what's going to get them into reading, right? Is that feeling that I remember that time that I got this thing and I actually wanted to read it. That's what we're hoping to get from kids.
Now, one of the reasons I love Toronto so much is it's one of the most diverse cities that I've ever visited. And one of the things that we celebrate here on Reading with Your Kids is that books can be a mirror window or a sliding glass door for kids to get to know people from other cultures.
Absolutely.
Not now, is there plans to offer diverse stories or stories featuring diverse characters?
There are diverse characters in all of our stories, from ethnic diversities as well as neurodivergence. So there are characters that are woven in that clearly are ADHD, autistic, but it's never spoken. They just are who they are. And so it's for kids to be able to reflect and see themselves, as well as for other kids to see a member of a friends group who clearly is neurodivergent without ever saying, hey, wait a second, I think this kid has ADHD. It's just the way that they act and the things that they do. We also have diversity of ethnicities in all of our stories so that kids, again, feel reflected. They get to see themselves and peers within their stories. Because like you said, Toronto's a very diverse city. So that just kind of comes naturally to us to make sure that that's included.
Boy, I hope you can at some point create books, an experience like this for grown-ups. And we see in the story that people from diverse perspectives and political thought can get along together. And, that might be too big a project for company.
That's definitely something. It's funny, the amount of adults that are like, when is this coming out for me? So I think there is a market there.
Okay. So, we have to get down to brass tacks. We know most books, cost $15, $20 for, a good children's book. What does a service like this cost the family?
So it depends. There's a few different offerings, but generally speaking, it's $99 for the 8 parts that you get mailed to your door over the course of 6 months. So essentially is, about $10, $12 a letter, that you get through the mail. And that includes everything. That includes your personalization, your postage, all the things.
Yep. That sounds very reasonable.
Yeah. We wanted it to also be inclusive from a cost point of view, right? We wanted to give that opportunity. And we are going to also offer a digital version for people who, for one, live in a rural area and mail is not really something that they get regularly. And also from a cost perspective, because that cuts a big chunk of the cost out as well if we're taking postage out. And also for kids who might be ADHD and can't go 3 weeks between letters and keep a plot, right? So a parent could get all of them and space it out and give it to them through their mail in a timely way that makes them feel like they could continue on with the story.
This is great. Now, I'm guessing that there'll be multiple stories offered so that if a kid finishes the first experience and loves it, there's an opportunity to go and do get a different set of letters.
Absolutely. So we're launching with 3 letters for the age group 7+. We sort of say 7 to 12, that kind of middle grade is what we're launching with. So there's 3 distinct adventures within that age group. One is more of a fantasy. It's about a set of twins who have to go find the magic in the forest to bring it back to the village before all the magic disappears. We have an outer space adventure where kids launch off in a rocket ship and get lost in space and have to try and find their way back to Earth by visiting aliens and planets and stuff like that. And then we have a mystery, which is a time travel adventure where a group of friends get pulled back to ancient Egypt and have to solve a mystery in order to get back to present day. So they're all written for the same age group, but there are different themes and sort of different styles in order to appeal to a wide group of kids. But that, like you said, if you loved one, the same kind of philosophy applies to each, so you could easily go through.
Now, I'm guessing that the book Taking Kids into Outer Space is longer than 10 minutes, right?
It is. It is longer than 11 minutes.
We should tell, well, you keep on saying it's launching. When is the launch date?
So we are going to be available for pre-sale in June. So very soon. And then we're not exactly sure when it's going to be out, but it's going to be out quite soon. We're fulfilling our Kickstarter in June. So that's sort of when things will start to move. And then we're hoping like through the summer, we'll start delivering our first sets of letters.
Fantastic. I just love, all these different innovative ways that people are coming up with to get kids excited about reading.
Yes. For me, it's such an important thing. And I've been writing for kids for almost 20 years, and there's nothing I like more than finding a new way in to reach those kids that are not in that center, right? They're not the ones that are just like any book you put in front of them, they read it. I want to reach those kids that might not choose to read and turn them into readers.
And I'm guessing that this might be a great way, because we are all about reading together as a family. This might be a great way to get that reluctant reader to read the stories to the parents.
100%, or do them together, or do them with a sibling. There's lots of ways that the family can be involved. And if you do have a kid that maybe they're not quite able to do it by themselves, what a fun thing to do with them, right? So it's definitely something that can be an individual or a whole family activity.
Now, I'm just curious. I was very surprised when I learned that it can take up to 3 to 4 years for a picture book to go from, when the manuscript is purchased to the day it gets on the shelf. How long has this idea been percolating in your imagination?
So Lance, who actually is our CEO and founder, has had this idea in his head for a long time, since his kids were small and they're growing up now. But these stories themselves, in the state that they're in, we got together, we first met last May. So it's been less than a year since we first met, to writing them, getting them illustrated, getting them all designed and ready to go.
Awesome. Well, this is fantastic. We should tell everybody where they can go to find out more about Storyay and maybe find out more about the team.
Absolutely. So you can find us online at mystoryay.com or on socials at _Storyay.
We've had a great time speaking to one of the forces driving a new innovative product. It's called Storyay. Our guest has been Sarah Furlong. Sarah, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Reading with Your Kids and will join us for the next exciting episode of the show. If you found this episode helpful, informative, inspiring, please consider leaving us a 5-star review on whatever platform you find Reading with Your Kids. And also, please consider sending a link from the show to someone in your life, family, friends, teacher, principal, somebody that can appreciate it and somebody that would love to join our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. We'd also love for you to connect with us on social media, facebook.com/readingwithyourkids, at Reading With Your Kids on Instagram, at Jelly Magic on X. We have a great YouTube channel, youtube.com/readingwithyourkids. And of course, our website is readingwithyourkids.com. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful, starting with our guest, Adam Rex. Please be sure to check out Echo. Also want to thank Sarah Furlong. Please be sure to check out Storyay. What an interesting and great service. I want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Chris Doherty, Rory Grady, Stella Sheree. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place. And you do that every time you read with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next episode of Reading with Your Kids.